Another chance to hear Geraldine Jamieson in conversation with the late Sir Norman Wisdom. The programme was recorded in the 1980s and was last broadcast in 2005 when Sir Norman announced his retirement from show business. Geraldine started by asking him about his childhood.
I was born in Marylebone and then I went to school in Paddington, which is not far away.
But did you spend then your first days, your early childhood in London?
Very early childhood, yes, until I was about 9. And then, unfortunately, my parents split up, well, they were divorced. Well, anyway, my father's, he put us with guardians. I say us because there was my brother and I. And after about a year, apparently, he wasn't paying the necessary money to pay for the food, and then but our diet came down to the occasional slice of bread and jam, and then it got to bread and dripping, which I prefer actually, and then it was really tough.
This is a real sob story. I mean, my heart bleeds for you. I don't know actually whether to believe you or not.
Well, no, I give you my word. No, that's really true, Geraldine, really true, and I don't mind because I used to go on scrounge. True. We used to go to the, I keep saying we, but we used to go to the school where the girls practiced cookery, and we used to eat what they'd made a mess of, but sometimes it was very good. And so we kept going all right. When I left school, which was 14, I hopped it. Left, that was in Deal in Kent. I went to London, was a commie waiter at the Artillery Mansions Hotel in Victoria Street. It's no longer there. Well, it's there, but it's a block of flats now, not a hotel.
Had you any real idea at that stage what you were going to do in life?
No, none whatsoever. No, I was just hoping that I might be able to earn a living. I would have gone down the mines. I'd have done anything at all at that time. Anything to get food and somewhere to sleep. But despite all these things, it sounds terrible, but I was very happy. And when you don't know any better, it's great, because when you pick up a banana that's just fallen off a stall somewhere down the back street, you enjoy that banana much more than if you're taking it off a silver tray, or it has been handed to you, rather, on a silver tray.
And of course, children anyway are fairly happy-go-lucky and compensate, really, for whatever situation in which they find themselves, don't they?
They take the situation they're in because they don't realise there's any other, and that's the one. Life is wonderful.
You were telling me earlier, though, that at this tender age of 14, you suddenly hopped it, as you say yourself, onto a boat that took you to the Argentine.
Well, that's right. I must tell you about the Artillery Mansions Hotel. I was a commie waiter. Now, but with a fellow, a little Welsh boy, was a page boy there, and he persuaded me that the ideal life would be working down the mines. And so together we packed a boot box with food, the old cardboard boot box, and we went off and walked from London to Cardiff. There was no hitchhiking in those days. And when we got to Cardiff, we'd nearly finished the food anyway, but I was going to live with him, see, and then we go down the mines. But when we got to Cardiff, he lived just outside at a place called Hengoed, which is about 20 or 30 miles outside of Cardiff, and he, quite as I realise now, deliberately picked a quarrel because he knew that his parents wouldn't let me live with in their house. He picked a quarrel. He was bigger than I was, and he pinched what was left of the food in the boot box, and that was the last I saw of him. And I was stranded in Cardiff on my own, and I wandered my way, I suppose, more out of curiosity than anything else, down to the shipyards.
To the docks.
To the docks. Now, I'm this time it was tough going. There weren't any jobs knocking about, and if I'd gone down to the proper dock and asked for a job, no way. But I inadvertently went down to the ship repair yard, where there was a ship that had just finished being repaired. What it had done to it, I don't know. But I went on that ship, and I asked for a job, and they gave me a job as a cabin boy. And
had you ever been on the sea before?
No, I'd never been away to sea. I slept on board, sort of thing, for a couple of nights, and about the third day after that, I was on the high seas on the way to the Argentine, spewing all over the side deck.
And of course, there was no way they could sack you then or return you to shore.
Too late. They could have chucked me in, but they'd have got into trouble. No, but and I was all right after 2 or 3 days, and then went through the roughest of seas without any effect on me. But I was in the Argentine. When I came back from the Argentine, I got the sack off the ship. Well, so did everybody else, because they'd all signed off, see. And I remember that I walked to London, and in fact the Labour Exchange sent me to a job in London at Earl's Court, as a kitchen boy. By the time I got there, you can understand that it's a couple of days later by the time I got to London, and I was hungry, and I'd got this job at Earl's Court, and I went in and they said, that's where you sleep and so forth. And you start work in the morning, but of course that same night I was caught in the larder, raiding the larder for food. I was starving hungry, and I got the sack straight away. I didn't even start the job.
Not again.
Yeah. Oh, so I was hopeless. And then I went to a coffee. I'm talking about 3:30 in the morning. This is real. Walking the streets of London. I slept behind the Marshal Fox statue at Victoria Station, and I used to go to a coffee stall and just look over the coffee stall, which just used to come up. I could just see over the edge of this coffee stall, and after about 10 minutes of this, just looking at the man, he would shove me a hot pie and a cup of Bovril, or mug of Bovril. And then he said to me, well, after 3 or 4 nights of this, he said, why don't you join the army, son? I said, don't be daft. No, I'm not big enough. No one would have me. He said, you'll get into the band. If you got into the band, he said, because you can join as a boy, and they know that you'll grow up, and by the time you're 18, that's when you come on your service, as it were, then, you're all right. And I said, really, that's true? He said, yeah. So I went to Scotland Yard, which was the recruiting centre, the following morning, and to my amazement, I passed the medical examination, and then I went on the waiting list to get into the army as a boy. Eventually a letter came that I'd been accepted, and I went into the army, and I was in the 10th Royal Hussars, and I was away in India before you know what happened. Nice and brown, and regular food, regular bed, companionship, pals, learning to play the clarinet. I was a trumpeter on guard within a couple of months. Oh, heaven.
Well, why didn't you make the army a career then? I mean, when did you start to become a comedian?
I intended to. I intended to make it a career at that time because it was a wonderful opportunity. And then I started, I used to go into the wash house, and I taught myself to tap dance, because when you first start playing on clarinet, it's 2 or 3 years before you reckon to be playing out with the band on engagements. And so in the meantime, you carry the drums about and you do all the chores, you see. They call it drum fatigues and prop fatigues. So I went into the wash house, and I taught myself to tap dance, and then I went to the bandmaster and I said, excuse me, sir, what would it be like if somebody did a tap dance in front of the band when you're having a concert? And he said, it'd be very good wisdom. Why? I said, well, I can tap dance. So he said, oh, really? Well, let me see you. So I did, right in the office there, I did a little tap dance with my army boots and all that, you see. And he said, fine. And when we had the concert, I was out front tap dancing, got applause from the troops. So then I went to the bandmaster and I said, excuse me, sir. He said, yes. I said, when you were doing a concert and I do a tap dance, supposing I come back later and when you're doing the sea shanties, because the whole band used to do sea shanties, you know, way hey jigga jigga in the jaunting car, you know those things. I said, there's nobody singing the solos, and supposing I did that. He said, well, wisdom, don't tell me. I said, yes, sir.
You can do that as well.
So then I used to sit in front of the band holding the clarinet, just playing occasional chuck-chuck. You know what a chuck-chuck is, do you?
No, please enlighten me.
Well, I mean, if for instance, if the band's playing the Blue Danube, you know, you get da 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 dim chuck 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 la da da dee da da dum chuck 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 chuck.
And the whole thing's thrown into confusion.
Well, no, they fit in musically. It's third clarinet plays chuck chucks, and I was sitting there playing third clarinet chuck chucks, which is dead easy, and then I'd go out and do my tap dance, and then I would sing a song after that, and the audience are saying, oh dear, this little fella, look, he's singing and dancing and he's playing the clarinet. And so then the band went up into the hills on a very important engagement for about 3 months, and I was left down on the plains, as it were, then at Lucknow, doing trumpet guards, because, you know, I blow Cookhouse and Last Post and all those, you see, on trumpet. And I tried something else. I got an old xylophone. Nobody played a xylophone. I got an old xylophone out of the store, and I practiced it. A piece called Two Imps, and so on. And you know, I'm going quicker than I ever did. It used to be. And when the band came down, it was customary to do band rehearsal in the morning. And when they get to, say, half an hour before the end, they'd run out of the music they were practicing, and the bandmaster would say, anybody fancy anything in particular? And I said, how about Snowflakes? And the bandmaster said, but Wisdom, that is the xylophone solo. And all the band laughed, and I said, yes, sir.
I can do that too now.
And he said, Wisdom, don't tell me. And so we got the xylophone out, and I played the xylophone. The band all had their music as well. And then in the very next concert, I was playing the xylophone, singing, dancing, playing clarinet. Oh, dear.
Well, I might be stepping out of sequence here a little bit, but when did that, tight-fitting suit and cap of yours come into being?
Well, that was quite a few years later, because, well, not all that many. But when we came back to England, I decided that I would try it professionally, because I had done other concerts. I did a concert, say, for instance, at the Cheltenham Town Hall, and so on, and it had gone very well. So I left the army, which I was entitled to at that time then, and I went to Collins Music Hall. At that time I was doing an act in a misfit evening dress, tails and the lot, where the shirt front used to come up and cover my face and all that sort of thing.
At the wrong moment.
That's right. The circumstances were strange. I just went to the manager and I said, excuse me, sir, I want to go on the stage. And he said, well, what have you done? I said, well, in the army concert. He said, oh, don't be silly. He said, there's professional artists that are coming out of the army, actors out of work, theatres are closing, variety of places are closing all over the country, and you want to start? Go away, son. So I took a room nearby, and for 3 weeks I became that man's shadow. And I mean, if he lifted a glass of beer to his mouth in the bar, my head was under his arm. Until in the finish he said, look, if I let you go on First House Monday and you're no good, will you promise to go away and leave me alone? So I said, okay. He said, all right, and if you stay for the week, I'll give you £5. And I agreed. And I went on First House Monday. Nobody came round after the show to say, that get out. Nobody came round to say well done either, but at least I was still on the next house, and the next house I worked harder still, and I wasn't quite so frightened. And then by Wednesday, this was on the Monday, you see, but by Wednesday I was getting confident and getting a few laughs. And on Thursday a man came round to the dressing room and he said, how would you like to work the Portsmouth Coliseum next week? And I said, oh, dearly, I would, please. So I was booked for the Portsmouth Coliseum, and I wrote it down in my little book. I bought a diary for my engagements, you see, and on the Saturday night another fella came in and he said, I'd like to book you for the Grand Theatre Basingstoke. And I said, I shall have to have a look at my diary to see if I've got and I said, yes, I said, yes, you'll be all right, you're lucky there, you see. And I was booked for the
just about fit you in.
Oh, the bull that goes on in show business, you have no idea. And you know what I mean by bull, don't you? Because I suppose you're keen on bullfighting. So anyway, I went to Portsmouth, and it went very well. Cutting a long story short, it was the first time I heard real laughs and applause, and what a difference, because that gave me the confidence. When I went to Basingstoke the following week, I did the first house, and the manager came round after first house. And I thought, oh God, here we go again, you see. And he said, can you do another spot for me in the second half of the show, not second house? And I said, well, I've only got the first spot. He said, oh dear. I said, but I'll do a second spot for you tomorrow night. And I sat up all night and I wrote another spot. And I did it on the Tuesday night, and it was a wow. And that became my best act. I slung the first one out, because that was playing piano and messing about and doing the falls and dancing and singing and so forth. And then an agent come along, and he asked me if I would like to have an agent. And I said, well, yeah, because then an agent gets you work. He said, that's right. And so I went. He got me a job at the Spa Theatre, Scarborough, for the summer season. I'd got all my work covered, my various acts for the 4 shows. Hard work that was, but I got it all written. There was a conjurer on the bill who we got to the last show, and and I shared a dressing room, funnily enough, with him. He said, I'm in trouble on the last act. He said, he said, would you come on and if I mess up a couple of tricks, you come up and mess them up with me, and then in that way, I'll complete. That'll be my last week's work. Oh dear, would you do it? And I said, oh yeah, all right. Of course, I was game for anything anyway. So I went out and I bought a little suit, tight-fitting suit, for 30 shillings. That's £1.50 for those who are too young to know. That was 30 shillings, and I bought a cap, a little tight-fitting cap, for a shilling. 1 shilling. What's that, 5p, isn't it?
I think so.
So, and I went on, and that act was a wow, and we were booked for the London Casino at the end of the season.
It's remarkable to think that 31 shillings has actually made you a fortune when you look at it.
Yes.
But what about your little cute trip? Did that come about by accident?
Oh no, this was all in the army. In if you were out marching, the fellas used to be saying. I mean, I did it after a while. I'd larking about, but the fellas used to be saying behind me, "Trip, Wizzy, Wizzy." They used to call me, "Trip, Wizzy," because I mean, you can say to a sergeant major, or you can say other rude things to them apart from that. But when it comes to tripping and things like that, they can't prove that it is deliberate insubordination. So you trip and you drop your rifle and you do all those things, and the fellas know that I really wasn't as mental as all that, and that I'm doing deliberately, and they're having fun.
Well, tell me about your experience in America, because I believe there's a super story behind that, all to do with the Ed Sullivan show, Norman.
I just went over on spec, because I had actually done a West End show called Sauce Piquante, in which Audrey Hepburn was a chorus girl, and we had a wonderful cast. The cast was Bob Monkhouse and Muriel Smith, Tommy Cooper, all these people in the cast. But it was a show that only lasted for about 10 weeks, and when it was finished I thought, well, that'll be my chance in the West End. Mind you, this is about 18 months or 2 years after I started the Basingstoke and the Portsmouth I've been telling you about. Just had a breath there. And I went into a cafe, had a cup of coffee, and there was a television up on a shelf, and there was a show going on there called Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town, and I thought, well, that seems to be a pretty all-round variety type of show. I'll have a try for that. So I went and I wanted to see Ed Sullivan, but of course I soon found out that you don't do that. I found a man, his agent, called, oh dear, what's his name? Jim Jessel, something like that. And I found Jim Jessel, and I said, excuse me, sir, I'd like to get on the Ed Sullivan show. And he said, listen, kid, we choose our artists, we choose them. They don't come and tell us. I said, oh. But I'm a comedian from England, and I'd like an opportunity. So he said, well, you don't get one with us unless you make a name for yourself first, because we choose them. Do you understand that, kid? So I found out where Ed Sullivan lived, which was the Delmonica Hotel, Park Avenue. And I went to the Delmonica Hotel, Park Avenue, and I found out his room number in there. And I went up to his room, I knocked on the door. A man came around to the door, and I said, my name's Mr. Wisdom. I have an appointment with Mr. Sullivan. And he said, oh, I didn't know anything about it. I said, oh, well, rest assured. Sort of. And he went in, and he came out, and he said, well, you come in. And I went into the hallway, which was a room. Well, the hallway was about 12 feet square, which is not a bad size. And I waited there for about 10 minutes, and Ed Sullivan came out in the dressing room. Obviously he hadn't been up very long, but then I suppose late nights and all that sort of thing, you can understand. And he just looked at me and he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm an English comedian, and I said, you'll have to forgive me, I'm what you call gate crashed, and I just would love to get onto your show. I saw it last night, and he said, all right, well, and he sat in the chair in the corner of this passage, and he said, show me what you do. So again, I danced and I sang and I told some gags and I did the falling about, and this went on for about, well, anything from 4 to 7 minutes, which is a long time in a small 12-foot square hallway with a bloke sitting in one chair watching.
And nobody else there
Nobody,
to applaud.
and no band, no music,
laugh.
nothing, you see. And eventually he stood up and he said, "That's how, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's very, very kind of you. I appreciate your initiative." But he said, "I'm afraid I don't use that sort of thing in my show." And he said, "I want you to know that I wish you luck." I said, "Mr. Sullivan, you're a gentleman. To allow me to try. Thank you very much." And I left. And I came back to England. Of course, I was skint. By this time, I was bloody hungry and all by this time. I tell you, I keep on swearing, isn't it wicked? But still, it's accepted these days, isn't it? Especially if you're hungry. And I came back to England, and I got a job at the Empress Hall in an ice show. And before, I was doing comedy on ice, skating, and then a routine with an old T-type Ford, with the doors falling off and the steering wheel coming off in my hand and all that sort of thing. The song sheet, it was marvellous. This is only a few months later. And I'm doing this ice show, and a fella came round and said to me, he said, who do you think's out front? I said, he said, Lou Grade, Lord Lou. And I had a message, would I go and see him the following morning? And so I went to his office, and he said, "Do you know what?" He said, I did enjoy it last night. He said, "I had a friend with me, and he said he would like you to go out to America and do a show for him." Oh, I said, back to America, and that's marvellous. I said, "Who was it?" He said, "It's a man called Ed Sullivan." And Ed Sullivan hadn't recognised me, and he'd come to see that show with Lou Grade, and he had said during the show, "Jesus, I like this little guy." And I went all the way back to America to do his show, and the thing was that he had asked for me, and I remembered what this Jimmy Jessel fella had said. We don't,
unless they're a name, we don't have anyone
unless they're a name,
coast to coast, cream of the cream show.
Absolutely right. So I said, "Well, yes, I'll go, but," and he said, "But what?" I said, "I want £2,000. £2,000. I mean, 2 months before I'd have done it for a stick of rock.
I think that's the best story I've heard for many a moon.
When I said to him, you don't know me," and he said, there's something that I got something on the brain, it's sort of ringing a bell, and I don't know what it. I said, "Well, I'm the fellow who came up into your little hallway and did it and that, and you said you don't use that sort of thing in my show." And he looked at me and he said, "Jesus Christ, I must be mad."
Now, I don't want to rush you, Norman.
And then he said, "But I did several shows for him after that. I went back and did several shows for him again after that." "No, you don't want to rush me." "Okay, yes." Now, go on, will I finish?
How many films have you made?
19.
And you made 19 films in all.
Trouble in Store was that was the first one I did, and that was with Perry Carstairs, and I got an Academy Award for that.
Absolutely.
I made 19. Really, it's 18 because that Light for Lucifer one, where I only did the little bit.
Well, how many Royal Command performances?
7.
And there was a private one, wasn't there, for the Royal Family at Windsor?
Private one at Windsor Castle, which was rather amusing too, because I was performing on the small stage in the sort of the ballroom, you see, and in front of the stage they had it was all bedecked with flowers in the pots, china pots and all that sort of thing, and there was a pathway leading down to Her Majesty, who was sitting at that end of the path, and that was deliberate because you had to, when you finished your act, you sort of come off the stage, bow, and then go back on stage and so. But I came off the stage, walked right down the path and went close to Her Majesty and bowed, and then realised that on no account must I turn my back on her to walk back up this path. So I backed up the path, and I missed the direction and went in all amongst the pots and the flowers and everything else, you see, and it was a terrible mess, and I never forget that I didn't know what to do. There was a stunned silence, and I could see that she was actually worried and concerned because, there was broken china and God knows what there. And I looked at her and I said, it's all right, Your Majesty, I'll pay. Everybody laughed and I shoved off, and she...
We could go on talking all day. It's so enjoyable and very kind of you. And thank you very much for being my guest. And I think in honour to your good self, what else can I do but to go out with your hit song?
Oh, you mean Don't Laugh at Me? I would like to go out by just singing a bit of it, and if you would applaud at the same time, just you and I, Geraldine, shall we? So don't laugh at me, 'cause I'm a fool. I'm a... I love. Bye-bye all.